Okay, we are now live on YouTube as well. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our book talk on urban environments and health in the Philippines, a retrospective on women street vendors and their spaces. My name is Karine, and I will be your moderator for today's talk. This event is co-organized by the Cordillera Studies Center, the College of Social Sciences MA Social and Development Studies Program, and the Kasarian Gender Studies Program. As an activity, it is also part of the celebrations of UP Baguio's 60th anniversary. And as the book subject also deals with the experiences of women, it is also related to the activities of the Kasarian Gender Studies Program. For UP Baguio, we are celebrating our commemoration for the 18-day campaign to end violence against women with the theme Safe Spaces, which is very apt for the theme of this book. So we will be having a very interesting discussion today. We request that all attendees send in their questions through the Q&A box, and we will get to them after the talk. All right, let's begin. It is also my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. The author of the book is Dr. Marianne Alabanza Akers, Dean and Professor of the School of Architecture and Planning at Morgan State University. She's a Baguio girl who left in 1984 to pursue a PhD in urban planning at Michigan State University. She has degrees from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, in sociology and urban planning. She started her academic career in 1979 at the Philippine Normal College in Manila and UP Baguio in 1981. She also worked professionally as a research analyst at the National Housing Authority and a settlement planner for the Benguet Corporation. Dr. Akers' research focuses on the impact of the built environment on health and well-being, student learning, and people's experiences. She has over 50 publications, including peer-reviewed papers, book chapters, and research or professional reports, and has recently published the book that we are going to discuss today, Urban Environments and Health in the Philippines, a retrospective on women street vendors and their spaces, published by Routledge, Taylor, and Francis Group. Her current research projects include a book chapter on citizen participation in smart cities and 2 books on leading as a Pinay in American academic settings, as well as the birth of a green building, of which she played a role in developing. As the founding dean of the School of Architecture and Planning, she built the architecture, landscape architecture, and city and regional planning programs. In addition, she created construction management and interior design degrees and will start a PhD in architecture, urbanism, and built environments next year. Dr. Akers is a busy woman, but before the pandemic, she visited Baguio twice a year to check on her father, architect Joseph Alabanza, who continues to serve the city of Baguio at 93 years old. Please welcome Dr. Marianne Alabanza Akers.
Thank you very much, Karine, and thank you all for spending the time. I know it's morning there, it's night here, but thank you so much for attending this book talk. I will share my screen so I can start. Okay, there. Here. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, Bo.
Okay, great. Thank you. Again, thank you very much for everyone who carved out time to this. I would like this to be more of a conversation. So I will go through the slides quite quickly. And also, if you have resources to buy the book, I suggest just do the ebook, because when I wrote this book, my purpose was really so that it's affordable to Filipinos. But when I found out after it was published that the hard copy is so expensive, even I can't afford it, I said, oh no, this is not really good. But the ebook is, I think, a little more affordable. So let me go. It's not moving forward. How do I move this? It's not moving forward. Oh, here? Nope. Every time I have a public talk, something technical happens. But let me we tried this, right? And it was working.
Hi, ma'am. Can you
Hi.
navigate to your PowerPoint presentation and then click arrow key?
The arrow key, where? Here? There. Okay.
Yes po.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me just put this. Okay. So the book starts off with what I wrote many, many years ago. The Baguio mountains of my youth beckons, a persistent, gentle tapping on my memory soul. Spirits of wind, water, earth, and sky whisper in silence, come back to us. The melodious call of pine trees bristle. I listen with my heart to the city's rhythm, harmonies that resonate in my conscious dreams. For these chants carry the mythical urban ballads of my youth, echoing their truths, permeating into my being. As my memory breathes this all in, I am transformed once again. The Cordillera spirits are calling. I am reminded that I am a child of the mountains. So it's not going again.
Zero to the side.
Yeah. I am so sorry for this. It's not moving forward again.
Ma'am, can you try po screen sharing again?
Screen sharing. Like
Oh, there. Oh my.
Stop screen share.
stop share and then I'll start over.
Yes, ma'am.
Um,
The PowerPoint presentation is already open, ma'am.
yeah, it's open.
Okay po.
Yeah, it's open.
Push it to the left. Push that to the left.
Huh? Okay. So okay. So this book actually was written way after I conducted a longitudinal study or a multi-year study of women street vendors in Baguio.
I'm
Acknowledge.
sorry, you're not screen sharing po.
Oh.
You can try again.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Here. Okay. Okay. Can you see that now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Okay. So, of course, my acknowledgements go to the women vendors who gave us their time, their stories, their food, and a lot of giveaways. Without them, this book would not have been written. The CSC at the University of the Philippines, kayo, thank you for the opportunity to work with your research assistants. Many of these research assistants were my students in 1980. It has indeed come full circle when I participated in developing the concept for CSC in 1979 to 80. So keep up the exceptional work you all are doing, because in terms of research, I was really very impressed with your research assistants. So why street vendors? In the book, I talk about an incident at 2 years old. Some of you may know that the Alabanzas have some souvenir shops all over the Stone Market at the time, Marbay now. But at 2 years old, I followed our sales girls, because that's where I kind of grew up in the Stone Building, in the market. And so I followed our sales girl out of the store, and she did not realize that I was following her. And so she just kept going and going. But, all these, I was so enamored with these different colors and sounds and smells. And then I found out I was lost. I couldn't see her anymore. So I started crying. And fortunately, the street vendors there, the women vendors knew my mother. They knew that I was the Alabanza girl. And so they said, oh, don't worry, we'll get your mom. So they went to our store and told my mom that I got lost. But that's where everything started. And anything that's women and their economic micro enterprise empowerment is something that's dear to my heart. So this longitudinal study of street vendors actually started in 1999 and went all the way for 10 years, not every year, maybe about every 2 years, but I'll talk more about the methods and the research focus, but every year was a different aspect of downtown Baguio. So here's what I want to emphasize. I could not have written the book immediately after the formal data collection was completed in 2006. The result would have been merely a published document devoid of thoughtful insight and cultural meaning. It would have just been, a typical research book talking about data and all that, but it wouldn't have been deep. But this book now reflects on my own voice, seasoned by time, age, and experience. So I'm glad I waited until 2019 to write this book, 20 years after the last phase of the study took place. So there are two things that I would like to share with you about this book. That's the concept of transdisciplinary research and decolonization. The decolonization process, many of you know this already. The West desires and extracts and claims ownership to our ways of knowing. But at the same time, the West rejects our ways of knowing and deny opportunities for us to center our local cultures. So the process shifts power imbalances in a way that dismantles dominant production of knowledge, binary thinking, and decontextualization. The striking down of colonial preeminence leads to a state of mind that validates experiences. And that's what I learned from writing this book, that we really need to focus and center our local ways of knowing rather than having Westerners tell us who we are. So writing this, as I said, was an act of decolonization because I opened my mind. It did open my mind. Authentic decolonization starts at childhood. I never realized this until I prepared this presentation several months ago because I gave another book talk. But if you notice, this is we live in Lobac, and this is our front yard. And if you notice, there's already here an ethnic structure. My dad, who's an architect, had 3 huts, native huts in front of our house to depict his children. Here we are, there I am, only girl. But here's another thing that I never realized. If you notice, behind him is also a painting of ethnic huts. And so from the start, even as a child, we were always taught to value and celebrate what's ethnic and not only anything that's Western. So here's just a book if you would like to read. It's Brown Skin and White Minds, especially us in Baguio, right? We were colonized, imperialized by the Americans. So during my time, English was spoken throughout the city, and that's one way again of really changing our minds, and the Americans, and even ingrained in us. It's like whatever is American is better than what's Filipino. And that's part of the decolonization layer that we need to get rid of. So decolonize your mind. And here's another thing that I have intentionally done when I wrote this book. There are many articles and papers and books about colonization, about our history. And what I did was I chose only the books that were written by Filipinos or by Asians or by people in the global South. And I tried to avoid, if I could, those theories that were very Western. So to me, this part of decolonization gave me more agency to value what research authenticity is about. And I know this because many researchers from abroad come to CSC, come to Baguio, come to the Philippines, and they do research there. I'm not trying to cancel the knowledge that they have built, but we need to be very, very careful also about how they view us and what they take from us, bring it to the West, and then it's what impact does that really have in transforming our city? They met their goal of extracting knowledge, but what's left for us? So that's from this, from this book, I really started deepening my decolonization. But another concept, let me go back. Another concept that from this book, sorry, you can't see this, it's this is hiding it, but it's transdisciplinarity. Let me just share with you what it is. You know how we have different disciplines, right? Down here, for example, multidisciplinary means getting these disciplines to interact with each other. Okay, fine. Interdisciplinary means sort of looking at where there are overlaps of different disciplines. The higher level, I believe, of transdisciplinarity is when you blend the different disciplines and out of it comes a new theory or a new way of looking at the world. This is good interdisciplinary, but what happens after? But when you blend all these disciplines, and this study is a perfect example of transdisciplinarity. So let me, oh gosh, here we go again. It's not going forward. Yes, research areas. So I started with the socioeconomic lives of the vendors, why and how they got into vending, how long, and then we even tracked where, you know, the vendors don't stay necessarily in one place. They move from area to area depending on how long they have been vending. And of course, they follow where people are. So we studied that first. The choices of where they locate is another area that we studied. And the vending history, I mentioned that. Relationships with formal businesses, because many of these informal micro enterprises or vendors actually have really good relationships with the formal businesses. In fact, some of them, and many of you know this, some of them keep their goods in the formal business. And then sometimes when there was this vendor on top of Upper Session Road, where when she would have to pick up her child from school, she would ask the sales girl in the store to watch her business. So we studied that. Of course, we studied the health conditions, their medical conditions, air quality. That was another thing that was really big, was the air quality. street material culture, and street life and behavior. Because I'm from the place and I go there very often, I have a really good sense of what has changed year to year. So site conditions, because I'm an urban planner, that was very important to us as well, to me as well. So here are some of the methods that we use. We use surveys to document their health, the air quality monitoring. I had a few students from the University of Georgia to come with me. We had site documentations. Many of your research assistants from CSC actually helped me in measuring the sidewalk length, the width of the sidewalk, the height of the sidewalk. We counted how many stories, all that. We had personal interviews, and we also had 10 vendors who we took to SLU Hospital to have their biometrics done. Of course, the behavior tracking was also an important one. And again, this is what transdisciplinary is. It's the stewing of data, of analysis, and reflection. So what has come out of this study? It's a concept that I call urban place node. Now, when you say urban node, it's the roots of this started with transportation, where in a station, for example, and it came again from the West, in a station where you have different like trains or buses, taxis, all these different forms of transportation sort of converge in one place. That's what they call an urban node. But the way that I looked at the urban place node, which came out of the study, is an intensified focal space that marks the intersectionality of place, people, and health. So it was a lot of layers. It was not just transportation. The transdisciplinary tool, again, frames urban street life. It's like a snapshot that I did of each of these nodes, and I studied those nodes for those 10 years that we did the multi-year study. So one thing that I go back to decolonizing the read of cities. If you look at Asian cities and you look at it from a Westerner's point of view, you would say, oh my gosh, ano ba yan? It's so messy, it's so busy, it's so like this and like that. But that's who we are in Asia, in Asian cities, right? We have a lot of texture in our cities. You have different colors, different signs, you have different transportations, you have electric lines. Those are all part of the city. Now I'm saying that the way we read this reflects our culture, reflects our values. And sometimes Westerners, what they do is, or even us who study in the West, we then take on this Western way of looking, that it has to be clean, it has to be, very, all the uses should conform and all that. So here's another example of urban life that is, again, from a foreigner perspective, from a Western perspective. What's this? Why is it like that? What are those rocks there in the basketball foundation? What are those flags up there? It's too busy. Well, this is the result of what we call globalization, where the way that we plan our spaces right now are exactly, again, from a Western perspective, very clean lines. You don't have a lot of street vendors. Your spaces are delineated, meaning there are seats and you can only sit there. So these are some of the spaces that we Filipinos tend to view as maganda yan. Wow, ang galing, ang galing. But if you would look at this, it almost depicts any type of city. I mean, there's really no distinct mark of what makes it a Filipino space. So that's part of my decolonization process as well. So let's talk about the 5 urban place nodes that I came up with in the book. I'll only talk about 3 so we can have more of a discussion. So Abanao Harrison Node, Upper Session Road, Middle Session Road, we had Lower Session Road, Malcolm Square, Magsaysay up to here, and then we had the General Luna node. So those are the 5. And they have distinct characters also. But mind you, within those nodes, you have little pockets of I would say subcultures. So let's talk about Upper Session Road. In Upper Session Road, you would notice sidewalk art around here, right? And one thing about this is this tends to be more of there are many historic markers here. Of course, Baden-Powell, which is still there, I assume, was actually that area was where the first American Philippine Commission held their session. That's why it was called Session Road. Of course, the post office is another historic marker. And then from Upper Session Road, you can also see Cathedral. I just want to read something about how important it is that this historic landmark, are studied and are considered in the way that we look at cities, Baguio particularly. So here's the Baguio Cathedral's symbolic presence is clearly magnified by 2 distinct memories, both involving my parents' recollection of significant events. As a young teenager, my father remembers the carpet bombing by the American military forces during World War II, because the American military forces did not have sufficient intelligence reports about where the Japanese troops were. They simply bombarded the entire area. When my father heard the airplanes coming, he and his family ran for shelter in the cathedral. So again, cathedral during his generation was a symbolic safe place. My mother, who was affiliated with the Yellow Ladies, a pro-Aquino group, during the 1986 People Power, on February 25th, when news reached Baguio that President Marcos and his family had left the country, my mother and the Yellow Ladies ran up to Baguio Cathedral, the church tower, and asked the young man to ring the bells, signifying freedom from a dictatorship government. So again, these are narratives of historic symbolic landmarks that we really should keep, because down the road, generations down the road, may not know about this. So let's keep on celebrating. And then, of course, the Abanao Magsaysay Avenue node. This is with Harrison and Abanao Street here. I didn't know this until I asked my father in 2019 while writing this, because I describe in the book the different parks here. I did not realize that he, in fact, was the one, as city architect, he designed these spaces here. And these were spaces designated by Daniel Burnham as a green strip in the bottom of Session Road. So from Igorot Park all the way to Plaza Park and then all the way to Malcolm Square was supposed to be a green strip. So again, very different from Upper Session Road. Here, you would see almost like a spaghetti junction here with all the, no, actually, these are traffic flows. over here. And there are big, how do you say this? Big TV monitors up here on this building here that again signifies our global economy. And then Sunshine Bakery has been an icon, a historic icon. I remember that's where we would get our pound cake, because they had the best pound cake in Baguio when I was growing up. So again, looking at this from people, from their health, the vendors here have the best health compared to the vendors in Middle Session Road, where the air quality was so bad there. And the street vendors had respiratory problems as well as skeletal problems. But the air quality here is not as bad. In fact, it's the best in the entire downtown, mainly because of Burnham Park. And then, okay, you see it there, the Plaza Garden. Just a few of the pictures that I took. And then lastly, General Luna. Again, historically, this was the Education and Medical Center. I know that St. Louis Boys High and Girls High has moved, but again, and University of Baguio as well. But again, we need to write down our narratives about this place, because I remember as a high school, high school student, we would have basketball games at the UB gym. And again, I have the book, in fact, here of memories of the earthquake when UB was one of the disaster zones. You know, as we continue to evolve as a city, I think all of you, really, your generation, continued writing about places in Baguio, about meanings and symbols of places, because down the road, we really need all these narratives to remind us what Baguio means. Okay, there as well, that's at the bottom of General Luna. That's, okay, and then that's Abanao Street. That's Mabini. Oh, wait, sorry. So, after I did all this research, since I'm a practitioner, an urban planner, I felt that the book needed some sort of urban strategies that the city could implement. But remember, it's very complex. It's not as easy as saying, do this, do that. There's got to be a comprehensive approach to improving the downtown area. Carrying capacity. We know that streets have a carrying capacity, and the city should be aware of this. When air quality is very high, when sidewalks are so filled with pedestrians that they are forced to walk on the streets. And I know that many city officials, as well as other old-timers, were saying that the reason for this is the vendors. And that's true, because the vendors take up space. But again, there's got to be some solution here. We have to make sure that we don't reach the carrying capacity. Then the entire area will deteriorate. Inclusive local economy. Women use vending as a way to supplement their income. Sometimes they are the main bread earners for their families. And I remember talking to a lot of either nonprofits or city officials who were saying, well, you know, we can train them to do this trade, like making souvenirs or what was that? I think baskets. But the market for baskets are only so much. How many people are gonna buy baskets every day? while these women, they sell things that everyday pedestrians use. They go there, for example, for mats. They go there for food every day. It's a daily thing. Also, another strategy that the city has done was to do the night market, to allow the vendors to go there at 9 o'clock and stay there till 12. I found out from some vendors that that's actually not economical for them. And again, we've got to really look at the informal sector as a sector that's going to be here. That is one of the ways that women are able to, again, help supplement their family income. Here are interesting strategies for health. In the book, I mentioned that maybe we can have like SLU students, medical students, or nurses who can help vendors monitor, for example, or just plain pedestrians monitor their health. Street level health interventions, I think, is very good. A lot of the vendors say the only time that they go to the hospital or have themselves checked or go to the doctor is when they're so sick. But again, we need to look at preventive health. Biophilic urban core. We need to green the downtown. No more cement. We need to make sure that we don't build up to capacity all those buildings that are really high, high rises. We have got to stop doing those. We have got to green the downtown. So my conclusion here is, and let me read from the book, building on this book, the next work to accomplish is a practical playbook for implementation. This collection would consist of new and innovative ideas, strategies, and solutions for local communities that arise from formal and informal input processes. It should involve various stakeholders like vendor groups, small business owners, enforcement officers, association of vehicle operators, city officials, media, and pedestrians, among others. The purpose for these participatory activities is to chip at unresolved issues and generate ideas that inspire tangible and long-term actions. So that's my next thing to do. Thank you very much. Salamat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akers. So now we will move to our open forum. So we actually have 2 questions already in the chat box. So let me just read it out for the benefit of our attendees and those listening via live stream. So first, from both questions from Professor Lynn Milgram. In the book, did you reflect on your own positionality or situatedness as a Filipina who has lived abroad for so many years, and how this shift in residence and community cultural interaction may have encouraged you to further reflect on your research?
So yes, and yes, Lynn. In fact, there is a section here where I talk about the in-between researcher. And there is, how do you say this, a literature, a group of literature that talks about this, how we in the Global South go to the Global North and study and go back to do research. And yes, I did grapple with that at first, but then there is a section. I did mention my positionality as a Baguio girl, as a Filipina Baguio girl. So yes.
Okay, and the second question is, could you talk a bit more about how you discuss the issue of class as well as that of ethnicity, given that researchers often occupy more advantageous positions than those of street vendors?
Yes, and I address that also. I acknowledged my class and my education. And I did say that my perspective may not necessarily be, I mean, it is to a certain extent to biased, but then that is why the CSC truly helped me in this, because the research assistants helped me. I'm not very fluent in Ilocano. I'm more fluent in Tagalog. But they helped me with the street vendors, and as well as the street vendors themselves. I have throughout the years established what's this good rapport with them, and they just saw me after a while, like just a Baguio girl. So yes, I did. I did acknowledge where I come from, or what my background is.
Okay, thank you. And we move to the Q&A box where there are a few questions here. So from anonymous attendees, thank you so much for the talk, Prof. I would love to hear more about Baguio's carrying capacity and what the local government could do for future planning for a sustainable population. With more and more people moving to Baguio as climate change and more economic opportunities arise in the city, what can we do to encourage our local government to take this problem seriously?
Yeah. So again, the urban place node could be a first point of, I would say, analysis. And I don't want to be too academic here because I am a practitioner as well. But one strategy does not fit all of the spaces in the downtown. So in terms of carrying capacity, we need to look at layers. Like, for example, the node, the Harrison-Abanao street node. As I said, the air quality there is not very high. In fact, it's the lowest. The sidewalks in Harrison are much larger than the ones in Magsaysay Avenue. And so we can't say, for example, oh, okay, the carrying capacity for the whole downtown is this. We've got to break it into different parts. And that's where the urban place node comes. The even like, for example, the direction of the slope of the sloping topography of General Luna, that impacts air quality. It impacts especially air quality, because especially when the jeepneys, when they rev up, the exhaust just go just kind of, the belching of those jeepneys. So again, that is different from, let's say, in Abanao Street, although it's going up towards City Hall, but it's not as much. So we have to take these spaces individually because they're very complicated.
And it's an interesting application of the urban place node analysis, ma'am. Thank you for that.
Yes.
So the next question is also from an anonymous attendee. Hi, ma'am. Thank you for this book talk. I am interested in knowing if you also looked in the traffic situation in the 5 areas you have mentioned. To what extent did traffic affect Baguio City life for these vendors?
Yes. So yes, we did. Every time we would, in all the multi-year study, we would do the traffic counting and the types of vehicles. And we did notice that a lot of people in the past, okay, this was in the past, would use Session Road not necessarily as a destination, but as a go-through. Harrison sometimes is also used as that. And so the higher density of vehicles that you have, it does impact the vendors in the sense that, aside from the air quality, sorry, I lost my train of thought. The traffic, we looked at jeepney stops, and we also noticed that there's a correlation between vendors, especially the old time vendors, because they're given priority in these areas. Wherever the jeepney stops are, that is where the vendors tend to locate their vending. Pedestrian walking on the sidewalks. We also counted pedestrians, and we noticed, yes, it does affect the vendors, because the more pedestrians you have, like Session Road, the more the vendors have sales. And we did ask them for how much they would earn a day and then a week. And of course, and the hour, even the hour. So when SLU at that time and UB would have their kids, the school is over, all the vendors, as you know, and I have a picture, I think I have a picture of that in my book, the vendors flock to those areas because they know that not only do you have student volume, but the parents who pick up their students are also there. So food vendors, toy vendors, particularly in the SLU area, that was very, very much, what's this, a correlation. We saw the correlation there.
Thank you for that, ma'am. So just really highlights how interconnected everything is in urban spaces.
Yes.
So the next question is from Fevi Rose Parel. The decolonization concept is very interesting, Prof. Akers. How do we influence urban planners to acknowledge this approach and apply it in their planning activities?
Yeah. Okay. One of the first things that I would say is be very critical about the books that you read. Be critical of the materials that you read. I remember when I took my master's in urban planning from UP, of course, UP, Diliman, many of the books were actually written by Americans. And so those strategies were, again, taught to us. And without thinking, we thought, yeah, this is the best way to do it. But we did not really look and contextualize our urban spaces at that time. And we have to be very careful about the books that we read. And that's why I say we have to create our own knowledge. So start writing. And it's also written in the book. In fact, I think it was one of my slides where when I came here to the United States, I did have, an inferior complex. Whenever I would talk about the Philippines, I would, sort of have a preface like, yeah, this is the Philippines and we should follow American planning. I would say that. And looking back at that, I would say, I would think, oh my gosh, but again, it's a journey. Decolonization does not happen overnight. There will be events, there will be triggers that will help you I'm still decolonizing. I will always be decolonizing, but the critical thinking is very important in the way that we look at cities. And here's another thing. I noticed that many local officials, and I know this for a fact, they would spend money for the public officials, like the elected officials, like the city councilors and all that. They'll spend money to go to European countries, right? Stay there for 2 weeks and look at many of them go shopping mostly, but they look at the different spaces because they want to mimic those spaces and bring those ideas back to Baguio or to the Philippines. I am not saying that we have to be very insular in our thinking. It's good to travel around, but my gosh, let's travel around Asia first. Why is it always European and the United States? Let's travel to South and Central America. Let's travel to the global South. Why do we have to always look at Eurocentric spaces as the standard of what we should achieve.
Right, ma'am. And just extending that a bit, ma'am, giving that decolonized frame of thinking. This is a question from our YouTube live stream from Professor Vanji Ram. Do you have some comments on the proposed development of the Baguio market by SM? What would be a decolonized take on that?
Hi, Vanji. I know you would ask a question like that. Okay, from what I know, okay, I think we have veered away from the historical context of what the market symbolizes. And if I were to be critical about that, it doesn't have much distinctiveness. I know, sure, you have a few, a few ethnic geometry, but does that really make a building, a symbol? That's a that's a longer discussion. And when I go back, Vanji, we can talk more about that. But I'm not a truly fan of what's happening.
I think it's also worth it to mention, ma'am, since your book focuses on the role of vendors, like where are they in this whole modernization of the Baguio market by SM? Anyway, so yes, so you were about to add something?
I was going to say, and that happens a lot in the global South, where the way that local governments would address vendors is put them in a market infrastructure. But guess what? After a few months, the vendors go back to the streets because it's highly structured in those marketplaces. First of all, they have to pay rent and it's highly structured. That's not the vendors' realities. One day, and I know this from our study, one day or one week, they may be selling socks and underwear. And then when they're out of stock, they go down maybe to Manila, and then they come back with another set of goods. So again, if you have a marketplace like that, that's not going to be allowed. They can't be flexible with what they sell. Highly regulated.
Okay, so our discussion so far has really focused on the decolonizing frame and how to apply that in reality. And that's actually the question again of the next anonymous attendee. Can you think of any example of a decolonized comprehensive land use plan? Or even if it's not the document, but what does decolonizing land use mean?
Okay. Okay. Here is the Western way of land use planning, okay? Put all uses, all the same uses in one place. That's how the suburbs grew here. All the residential should be all in one place. All the businesses should be in one place. But in Asian cities and in the global South, the mixed use is just part of our life. So celebrating mixed use is very important. That's one way of decolonizing land use. Here's another, and I'll bring that, I'll peel off another layer. And I'm still studying this and reflecting on this. Names of streets. This has nothing to do with land use, but it does have something to do with place memory, which is very important. You have Leonard Wood Road, you have Harrison, you have Session Road. I'm glad we have a local Magsaysay avenue, but many of our street names in Baguio are very Americanized, right? So, okay, what's the significance of Harrison, for example, to that particular road? there may be, there may be a significant person who can symbolize Harrison. Case in point, the Chinese school. Is it still there? Yeah, I think it's still there, right?
Yes, it is.
The founder of the Chinese school. I mean, most likely he was a man. Could be the name for Harrison. Now, look, as I said, I haven't thought. I've been thinking about this a lot, but I'm still reflecting on what we should do about our names, our street names in Baguio. That's one way of decolonizing urban spaces. But again, remember, the Americans had an impact, okay? I'm not saying erase American history. I'm not saying that. But you decentralize, you defocus the American history and put Baguio history. I know there's a Carino Street, but it's way there in near Saint where's that? At the back of Central School, right? So there is a Carino. Well, can't we have a Carino Street in downtown or in the major streets? What about those families who were there before the Americans came? Why can't we celebrate them and put their names into, our streets?
Right. Okay, thank you po for that. And going back to the topic of the Baguio market, a question from Professor Rowena Boquiren. Dr. Marianne, since modernization, quote unquote, is the direction that the city government has been pursuing, despite civil society efforts to correct that after the 1990 earthquake, what do you think? Must there be street vendors or satellite markets? Would that be better?
Okay. Hi, Wang. Again, that's a very complex issue. I believe in giving the informal sector a place in our economy. Because if we formalize every single thing, then you lose the creativity of these street vendors. You lose their agencies. You lose their agency. In other words, we need to empower them to make their own laws to a certain extent, to make their own regulations and hold them accountable. Satellite markets they serve a certain purpose to decongest the downtown to a certain extent. But again, the informal sector they come to downtown mainly because that's where their market is. That's where pedestrian traffic is. So the market situation, I still believe that we need to support the informal sector as part of the stakeholder in the market.
Thank you for that po. And so we have another question here that is more on the method that you've used in your analysis. So from a more academic point of view, from the concept of urban place node as unit and tool of analysis, what other units and tools of analysis are there for a study similar to what you have done? And how does one conduct place node analysis?
Yeah. So I wish well, that's fine. I was going to go back to a slide that showed the different, the multi-methods that we used. So again, depending on the nature of the node, there are different, methods that you should use. I think if you want to do a meta-analysis, then you need to do all the nodes. You need to do, for example, surveys, just like what we did. We did just focus on a particular node. The first step is really do a meta analysis or meta data collection. And then after you do the meta, then patterns will come out that are unique and distinct. And that's where you start designating your urban place node. And then from there, you really look at it separate from the other nodes or separate from the entire, let's say, entire city. Look at it. Qualitative information, qualitative method is very important as well. People behavior is very important. I noticed, for example, when people walk in Harrison, they walk like this, right? Straight, 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 because the streets are wide. But the people who walk, the pedestrians who walk in Magsaysay, they have a certain way of movement where, you know, they swerve because, again, of space. See, you wouldn't know that if you did a meta-analysis of just, okay, these are the, number of people. But if you really look at each node and dig deep into the different nuances of the nodes, then all these patterns will come out that are distinct.
That's really interesting, ma'am. So can you expound more about that? Like how transdisciplinarity was operationalized in your study? Like how did you get researchers of different fields together, and what did that look like?
Okay, interesting. I'm glad you asked that, because and that's another thing about the multi-year study. I did not ever think that it would take 10 years for me to collect data, but I was just drawn to the study. We started out initially, we just did a survey of vendors, their socioeconomic activities and situations, and then their location choices. I never thought that I would even go to their health aspect. It just evolved. Every year was a different thing. That was not a but a long-term thought plan. It just occurred spontaneously. When we did the health survey of, I think we had 300 vendors all around the nodes, our researchers noticed that the air pollution was so bad that they got sick. And so with that said, I said, whoa, okay, maybe we should do air quality. So the next time I was able to get a grant and get environmental science students to come with me to actually do the air quality. So it was a building of it. And then we knew where the worst spots were for air quality. So the next one was, okay, we have a health survey, but that was self-reported. We need to have biometrics. So I said, okay, next time we go, the next year, at that time, the director of the SLU hospital helped me, and he gave his services for free, where we chose 10 people from different nodes, and we had their biometrics, we had their oxygen, content, and their blood was drawn. What else did we do? Anyway, so we did that. So again, it evolved, and then the transdisciplinary came when then I looked at everything. Remember, the only common denominator in all the people who were involved was the CSC researchers. Many of them came back. They studied like in 3 years. They did come back, so they were common. And then of course my husband, who is a health researcher, and me, we're the common people who did most of all of it, obviously. But like the nurses and the doctors that came with us, they only came that year. So they did not really see the context. Ideally, it would have been nice if all of us got together with the environmental scientists, with the CSC researchers together and come up with, okay, here's the data. How can we make sense of the data? That would have been ideal. But I didn't do that. So
right, well, it's really interesting. Well, the result was really good, ma'am. I think you really gave a transdisciplinary look of the urban spaces in Baguio. I believe Professor Bakiran has a follow-up. So, hi, Mary, and mixed use seems contrary to the tall concrete structures with car parking lots that are preferred by the local government. So, any comments on that?
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that's the modern way of doing things. I don't necessarily agree. But oftentimes we are really so attached to our vehicles that now we're giving up prime space for vehicles. And then the mixed use. And that's what happens when we have really big developments. Shoemart, no, do you call it Shoemart? No. During my time, we call that Shoemart because it started with Shoemart, but now it's called SM. Nobody knows Shoemart. When I went home, I said, where's Shoemart now? What, that big structure? No, that's SM. Something like that. Again, I mean, I was a girl when Pines Hotel was still there. But now, do you even see any remnants of the history of that place? But again, the mixed uses is best when you have buildings and urban spaces that are not gigantic and that are not one developer. And that's what happens when you have one developer. Although SM has different use, not really. No, I wouldn't say they have different uses. But all our more traditional spaces in the downtown are mixed use. You have residences on top, and then you have shops, and then offices on the second floor. So that's mixed use.
And related to, I suppose, development and urban planning, I have a question here about Baguio City being originally urban planned by Daniel Burnham, who's an American. So in the early 1900s, the American architect and planner Daniel Burnham produced a plan for the city. Apparently, the plan was in the early years of the city, followed by officials, but it was abandoned after some time. Burnham prescribed a maximum population of 25,000 inhabitants for the city. I mean, for context, I think we're now more than 300,000 in Baguio City, plus minus a few more tens of thousands who come up and down from La Union and the surrounding provinces. So what is your position on that, like that framework of deliberate urban planning as exemplified by Burnham?
Okay, and I did give a talk on this several times. And well, first of all, that's imperialism in its purest form. Daniel Burnham he's an architect. He was an architect. But when I looked at his diary and other documents that describe his journey, when he wasn't used to tropical weather. So he came to the Philippines, of course, through boat and all that. It took him months to get to the Philippines. He was not healthy. He's a big guy. He was not healthy. He was sickly. He was not used to the weather. So when he came to Baguio, he was indoors a lot because he was sick. He was in Baguio, and it's in the book, several days only. And there was only one day that I can digest from all the literature that I have looked at, reviewed. One day that he went around on his horse around the city, looked at it, came back, kind of sketched, and then he actually finalized his sketch, not in Baguio, but when he was en route back to America. So his perspective was very much like Washington D.C. And other cities that he planned, where the government played a big role. It was almost the center of a lot of cities here. And like DC, like Washington DC, he planned this mall, this big pool. That's where he got the idea also of Burnham Park. Oh, that's another thing. We may have, well, I don't know. I was gonna say we may have to maybe change that name to make it more local. Dig into the historical people who had footprints in that land. But again, it's I don't want to again cancel American culture. I'm being critical about this. Why did he make Session Road sort of the commercial, in a way, the commercial district? Normally, the commercial districts are in flat areas. But why did he plan it so that Session Road would be a commercial district? I think he put the government as the priority. And if you notice, City Hall and the Supreme Court area, there's a straight axle line that connects them view-wise. Well, now you cannot see it because of trees and all that. But that's just another American way of looking at it, where the government was center.
Right. So fast forward a few 100 years, and there are more other initiatives now that are currently trying to take back portions of the city for the people. And one of them is bike lanes. So we have a question here from Professor Farah Manuel Nolasco, who's also part of the Daily Cycle Movement, Baguio Women Riders. And her question is, there's a plan for bike lanes. Some have already been plotted around the city. How do you think sustainable mobility plays a part in the city's unique urban ecosystem?
Yeah. So during my time, the only place we biked was in Burnham Park. But so in terms of bike lanes, that you're giving the public, you're giving citizens different modalities of transport. And I think that is a good idea. You will also lessen vehicles that spew a lot of exhaust. It will improve air quality. But you have to choose the lines, the bike lanes, very, very intentional. You do not put a bike lane, for example, on Session Road. Unless you're a really avid biker, even walking Session Road could give you a lot of hingal na hingal ka. But again, it's important that you look at topography. You look at destinations, because if are you using bike lanes as just, or are bikers using that modality of transportation just as a leisure activity or as a necessity? Those are questions that have to be asked.
Thank you for that. So we still have a few more minutes with Prof. Akers. I encourage everyone to send in any other questions that they may have. But for now, I think there's a few comments in the chat that are not necessarily questions. So let me just read them out. So from Prof. Castor Palaganas, thank you very much for your presentation. My nanay was among the first vendors of the Baguio City Market. We had food on the table and went to school because of the income from vending. Your talk brought back so much poignant memories. We still have a stall in the market, and I will make sure to buy your book. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Ayan
Yes.
po. And I think we have another message from Fevy from UP Los Baños asking you for
Oh,
your
yeah.
email po. So I think they would like to continue this in future conversations with you. So perhaps
Yes.
you could just send your email in the chat for anyone who would want to contact you.
Oh, yeah. And wait, I'll put it here.
Yeah.
Yes, and you know what? I would be willing to do another book chat at UP Los Baños if you. I know Ricky, your either he's your boss or whatever, was my classmate in UP Diliman when we went to graduate school together in urban planning. Oh, I remember Ricky and our class, because after what's this, after our classes, we would go to Katipunan and drink San Miguel beer, and it was so much fun because what we would talk about would be about planning, philosophy. We would have debates and all that, so that was such a fun time. So say hi to Ricky.
Ayun po, meron po tayong humabol na tanong. So from Prof. Vanji pa rin po. Baguio streets have been so car-centric that pedestrians have been relegated to using unfriendly overpasses. So any comments po on that?
Yeah. The debate there is, especially with Baguio, because it is a rainy city, that overpasses are the way to go in terms of making sure that the pedestrians are safe from cars, and they take shelter from the rain. However, my analysis of overheads is they take the pedestrians away from the streets, and to enhance and encourage street life. Yeah, lessen the vehicles, but pedestrians are very important as part of the streets. And in fact, some vendors say that at night, and many of these women, like at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, they would be there still vending. They feel safer when there are pedestrians walking about than when there's none. And so when you have overhead, they take away from street life. So now it's a very complex situation here, especially, as I said, it's rainy. So one of the suggestions is for the buildings on these sidewalks, that they, as part of their service or giving back to the city, is if they could, the overhangs could help in sheltering people, pedestrians, from the rain. And we noticed that because we also measured the overhangs over the sidewalks. And we noticed that the vendors that were underneath the overhangs had better sales. Obviously, because when you're a pedestrian and it's rainy, you wouldn't stop unless you had an umbrella, but normally you wouldn't stop just anywhere. You would stop at the vendors who were under an overhang. And that's why on Magsaysay Avenue, like in front of Chongsan, that area, because the overhang goes really, it shelters people. They have good business there. And of course, with all the jeepney stops, in Lacandula and all that. So.
And we have a follow-up comment po to that overpasses are actually very unfriendly for persons with disabilities. Because they're high and steep. So do you have some comments on that one, making the urban space more friendly for persons with disabilities? It was actually an issue here in Baguio recently because the city office installed these tactile, I'm not sure what you call it, these tactile markers on the
Yeah.
sidewalk for persons with disabilities. However, the people in that community, they spoke up saying that it actually made it slippery. So for some reason,
Mm,
perhaps they were not consulted on what
Yeah.
kind of material to use or anything
Yeah.
like that. So would you have any comments on that?
Yeah. And that's very important in urban planning. Before you implement a strategy, you really need to ask the users, because they're the ones who live in those spaces, who use those spaces. So yes, they definitely, and I have a picture of a man who was in, and I observed him crossing a Banao Street. And he had, obviously, he couldn't go up the overhang. So he would just go through it. I was so scared for him, because even if he was in the pedestrian crosswalk, the vehicles did not stop for him. So that was a and very dangerous situation. And I did observe that. So I do agree 100%.
Okay po. So I think we're winding down our book talk now, and there aren't any more questions that are coming in. So perhaps, ma'am, you could just give your last words, any final comments, perhaps future opportunities for research in this topic.
Yeah. So again, I think it's important that we do take our physical environments very, very seriously, because they impact our wellness, they impact our lives. And so when you do, for the social scientists as well as the environmental planners who are in the audience, you need to collaborate. You need to do things together, plus the health side, because it's very important that all these disciplines come together to look at the situation from various perspectives. So that's in terms of research. Yeah, we'll see. When the pandemic is over, I'd like to go back. I'd like to go back, hopefully next year, like maybe June, July, although rainy season yon. But that's fine. I go back very often, and maybe we can brainstorm on what the next thing is. Oh, here's another thing. CSC people and those in academia, when you do research, I think it would be good to also collaborate with the local government, because oftentimes when they make decisions, they don't have evidence. They again, maybe take it from abroad, or think just well, I wouldn't say randomly, but they need to look at things from again, from various perspectives, and applied research is very important to give them that justification on the strategies that they implement. So collaboration again.
Yes, thank you for that, Dr. Akers. So it's really very important that all of these things that we're talking about make their way somehow to evidence-informed public policy, for a better environment in Baguio City and for everyone as well. So so that's all the time that we have. We're wrapping up this book talk. Please fill up our evaluation form that is in the chat box that's been sent by Sir Jeffrey of CSC. Thank you again, Dr. Akers, for sharing your book with us. And thank you to the audience in here and on our live stream for joining us today. So have a good day, everyone. And thank you very much, Dr. Akers. Good evening po pala sa inyo.
Good evening. Oo nga. Matutulog na ako. Bye, everyone.
Thank you po. Thank you very much.
Sige. Bye. Okay, how do I leave this?